I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of the most frequently used components in my Savage Axis builds. Those of you who followed along with my builds on Savage Shooters or here on YouTube, or those of you who've read the title of this video, probably have guessed that it's a Boyds laminate stock. And it's true, I've used it in all but one of my Savage Axis builds. I'm a big fan of Boyds, or at least I have been in the past, although recently, and part of the reason I'm making this video, is to explain why I'm no longer going to be using them in my builds. But before I get into why I'm no longer a fan of Boyds, or why I'm not going to be using them anymore, I'd like to go over a few of the things that I like about Boyds stocks. First of all is their price point. Most of the time you can get a basic Boyds Savage Axis stock for under $150. The price has gone up recently, but I'll get into that later. It's currently the cheapest option for restocking a Savage Axis, although with the emergence of the Savage Axis 2 with hardwood stocks, that may change in the future. I also like the general quality of it. Once again, I'll talk more about the quality level as this video goes on. But the stock itself is made out of a good quality wood, at least the colored laminates are. The standard coated laminates for example, tactical or pro varmint stocks leave a little bit more to be desired. But overall, it's a good quality stock. The build quality is usually pretty good. I've had a 300 Win Mag Savage Axis with the integral stock provided by the integral recoil lug provided by Boyds, and it's held up remarkably well. They're also pretty easy to modify. The wood works just like a normal laminate would, so when you're going to pillar and bed it, it's not a problem for normal woodworking tools, although there may be more to say on that later as well. Now, before I get into too harsh of a criticism of Boyds, a brief history, as far as I'm aware, of the evolution of the Boyds Savage Axis stock. Boyds was not the first manufacturer to offer an aftermarket stock for the Savage Axis. I think that was actually Sharpshooter Supply. Boyds came along a bit later, in late 2013, if I'm not mistaken. That's when I bought my first Boyds stock. It was a classic. This is a platinum, but it gives you a sort of idea. Doesn't have the weird finger grooves up here, though. When it first arrived, it came with a metal trigger guard, steel trigger guard, a steel escutcheon underneath the plastic mag latch plate. I'm not sure what this piece is called, but there was a steel piece underneath it that acted as sort of a half a pillar, and that was steel. Moving on, the stock started changing. I noticed they started shipping with a plastic trigger guard, but still with a metal escutcheon up front. And then even later on in 2015, I believe, they started shipping with a plastic escutcheon up front. And more recently, they've started shipping with some sort of weird, and right now I've just got a piece of Scotch tape holding this on. That's more retention than Boyds provides it. This plastic combination piece, that's the mag latch plate and the escutcheon, made out of some sort of injected molded plastic that just sits in the stock. It does not mechanically lock. The mag latch plate, of previous iterations of Boyds stocks fit into a channel that was grooved into the front of the stock, the front of the mag well area. It held it tightly and positively, even if there was no action screw installed. As you saw with this one, the piece just sort of falls out if there's no action screw installed, and that I think is something of a detriment. On a short action stock like this, you could actually hold the magazine in place after you've removed the rifle from the stock, as I've done here. That's no longer possible, and that's a minor quibble, of course, but it also speaks to the descent in quality in terms of the plastic parts that are being used in lieu of steel ones. Now, these quality changes have come hand in hand with the price increases over the last few years as well. We're talking about an increase of somewhere between 20 and 40% depending on the model. This is as of 2016. A pro varmint stock, which, as you could probably tell, is my favorite pattern that they offer. For example, I think increased from just over $100 to something closer to $140, $150 for a colored laminate, like this one is here. The older one that I'd gotten, that's this one for my 243, is made out of the plywood or the Baltic birch plywood. Fortunately, I've not had any problems with it splitting, but a lot of people have. The colored laminates seem to be a lot stronger in terms of delamination around the action screws. As you can see, mine is bedded and pillared, so I'm not too concerned about that. But even before I had it pillared and bedded, I'd not run into problems with that. But apart from the price increases outstripping inflation pretty severely, coupled with the decreasing quality of the parts, has made me really reconsider my recommendation for these stocks. Any future products involving the Axis will probably involve a sharpshooter supply stock if I'm going with laminate, or waiting, crossed fingers, for MDT to introduce an HS3 or some other sort of chassis for the Axis. They already have the LSS, but I tend to like longer barrels on my long-range guns, so I'm waiting for a more supportive chassis system for that. So while this plastic piece, the front action screw plastic combination piece, I believe is actually quite similar to the system that Sharpshooter Supply uses. They use one that's made out of metal, either brass or steel, I can't remember which. I've never actually got my hands on a Sharpshooter Supply, though they come highly recommended. It's very similar to that design, however, I believe the Sharpshooter Supply does lock in place somehow. And it just seems like a logical, even if it's just a friction fit with some sort of insert to keep it in place in the wood, that would be better than just a sliding friction fit. However, I don't believe Boyds can't return from this or can't come back from it and make a better product, because they've proven they can in the past. Simply going with the separate mag catch plate would be a big step. Most people I know who've gotten the plastic escutcheon when they were two separate parts would just remove it. I've done that on my Magnum Axis and a couple other Axises. Because once the pillar is in, the escutcheon really doesn't matter. It's more of an aesthetic thing rather than anything else, and since it's hidden by the mag catch plate, it doesn't really matter. Same thing with the trigger guard. One option that could help Boyds would be to offer that as an option when you're customizing your stock, rather than having to try to find it separately on the site or trying to order it separately and getting charged $16 for shipping on a $12 part. That does not strike me as good business, and I've never bought a trigger guard from them if I've ever forgotten to add one on when I'm ordering a stock. But yeah, other than that, Boyds makes a pretty good piece of wood, a pretty good stick. As you can see, this is from my long range 243. As I mentioned 243, but it's the one I've been using to shoot long range. This is a well-loved, well-used stock. It takes paint really well. But I've got an adjustable Graco butt plate here in prone position, a homemade Kydex cheek riser, basically a Karsten clone, if you couldn't tell. And it's been pillared and bedded, as I said, with some brass pipe and Devcon steel epoxy. One other thing, if you've got one of these stocks that you might consider doing, is there's a plastic mag catch plate, another plastic mag catch plate in the back of the mag well for short action stocks. For long action stocks, you don't need to worry about this since the magazine clips into the receiver. I've drilled it and put a small wood screw through it to hold it down. When I was taking a long range class, this plate came loose, disabled my magazine until I got it fixed. Fortunately, it's sort of also not thumbnailed in there. That's what I'm looking for. Dovetailed. There's a channel in there for the plastic, so it's not as likely to come out as it would be if it's attached like the new front escutcheon mag catch assembly. But it's a good thing to do to prevent that, to prevent your rifle from going down when you need it most. As I mentioned, the recoil lugs have been holding up really well. I'm not sure what epoxy they use to hold it in there, but it seems to hold up fine, like I said, even with a Magnum round. A couple other modifications I've made to mine, obviously. Got sling swivels on the side. And of course the bipod is just a Harris clone. I may be upgrading to something more serious later, but I'm not looking at that right now. But yeah, as I said, Boyds really has an opportunity to present a good product here, and I'm sorry that they're not. They no longer get my recommendation. If you do go with a Boyds stock, however, I would recommend that you get a recoil pad installed by them. That's still probably one of the best deals around. As you can see on this one, I've got a 1-inch, I believe it's a limb saver pad. To order it and have it put on the stock by Boyds cost less than it would for me to order it myself and try to put it on myself. So it's a good deal on that as well. Oh, another custom option that might be nice is to, and this obviously would require more machining or more machining steps, is to offer the pre-drilled holes for a Karsten-style cheek rest. Boyds does have their own adjustable cheek rest that they've recently begun offering. However, it's $60, $60, almost $70. A more cost-effective option may be to just have it pre-drilled for a Kydex cheek riser. Those are just my 2 cents. I hope this video has been instructive for you. I don't mean to badmouth Boyds, and one of the reasons I wanted to appear on film, at least close up here, is to put my face to this critical review. I do hope they continue making a good product and continue making their products better. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. As always, drop a comment here or send me a message via YouTube. Have a good day.